Welcome to the Navseam podcast, where classical gourmands everywhere can finally get their fill. Join us for a delectable discussion of Greco-Roman civilization stretching from the Minoans and Mycenaeans through the Renaissance and right down to the present. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here are your hosts, Dr. David Noe and Dr. Jeff Winkle.
Welcome, listeners, to episode 111 of the Navseam podcast. My name is Dr. Jeff Winkle. I'm down here in the bunker on this sunny Saturday in the frigid temperatures. We just got through some really frigid temperatures. It's kind of warming up out there now.
It was cold.
Yeah, it was, but it's looking beautiful out there with the sun reflecting off the snow. I'm loving it. We don't get many days like that.
No, it's incredible.
Yeah.
Blue sky, sun pouring down, melting the ice, melting the snow. Mm-hmm. And so far I'm doing pretty well in terms of not complaining about the weather.
Excellent.
You notice I haven't said smarch once?
Not once.
On this entire podcast?
No.
In several weeks.
I know.
And so we got sunshine. We have some warm temps coming here to the frozen tundra.
Yeah.
And I got on my Tauntaun yesterday and went down to the... the Quickie Mart or something like that, and bought some snacks and made it back without having to eviscerate the animal.
And crawl inside.
That's correct.
To save yourself from the bitter cold.
Yes. How about you?
I'm doing well. But listeners, if you're new to the podcast, the other voice you hear is my co-host, Dr. David Noe.
Oh, you're going to introduce me?
Yeah, on the other side of the on the other side of the table. But
I appreciate that.
I'd ask you how you were doing, but it seems like you're doing pretty well.
Not as well as you.
Oh no!
Whenever I get into the car, you say, "Great, I'm doing great."
Yeah.
Takes me some time to work up to that.
I got you, but it feels like you're getting there.
I am.
All right.
One thing that's going to help is if we mention a corrigendum.
Oh, this is very important.
It is. Yeah. So on the previous episode, the last one before this one, someone said that Uncrustables was a product of Nabisco, the National Biscuit Company.
That's not correct.
That's not correct at all.
Okay.
So I know those of you who are at home taking notes, trying to keep everything squared away, you thought that was made by Nabisco. It's a product of Smucker's.
Oh, okay. So Smucker's makes the Uncrustables.
That's right. This is some kind of sandwich. I still haven't yet tasted one. I've just gazed at them longingly from a distance. It's some kind of a sandwich from which the crust has been removed, thus the name.
Right. So it saves you all of that time of cutting off the crust, right?
Yep.
Wow. If somebody asked me about the Smucker's company, I would have sworn that they were a subsidiary of the Nabisco company.
Would you?
Right, but they're their own behemoth. Apparently.
And I would have thought that Nabisco is a subsidiary of Necco.
Necco?
You've heard of Necco?
Like the Necco wafer?
That's correct. And you know what that stands for?
What?
New England Candy Company.
Is that right?
Yes. All these brands with their acronyms.
I think I just learned last week that Nabisco is National Biscuit Company.
I know, you're surprised.
No idea.
Yes.
That's crazy.
It's surprised. And you know what Welch stands for?
Well, like the grape juice?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, what is it?
It's the name of the guy that, figured out the pasteurization of grape juice. So we don't have to drink nasty wine.
Wow, man, you are a font of all kinds of
irrelevant
fairly
things.
useless information, right?
Speaking of irrelevancies, we have no shout out this week.
We don't.
But we shouldn't dwell on that too long, I would say. Let's just move right on.
I think we have some people that they're interested in getting a shout out. They're maybe just a little shy. We got to drag them over into the end zone.
Yes. Okay. So we got an opening quote this week as we continue on in our discussion of Aeneid Book 9.
Yeah. Shall I read this?
I would like that.
All right.
Yes.
So just to set this up a little bit, if you listen to the previous episode, we spent a lot of time talking about Nisus and Euryalus, these two young Trojans who go out on this night raid. They're going out to bring Aeneas back to the camp. But before going there, they go into the Rutulian camp and they slaughter a bunch of them and they steal a bunch of their stuff, but they don't make it out.
No, it's a tragedy. They end in a pile of corpses, piled upon each other with the Rutulians, having dispatched them for their bloodlust.
Exactly. Right. And we were talking about how that compares or is a corollary to the Dolaneia episode in Book 10 of the Iliad. And so I found this quote by one George Duckworth. This is from an article called The Significance of Nisus and Euryalus for Aeneid 9 through 12 from the American Journal of Philology way back in April of 1967. So I thought this is kind of a nice way to maybe kind of round this episode off or to add a couple more things to it.
To maybe bridge a little bit with the previous one?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So Duckworth writes, killing the enemy was not the purpose of the night expedition. It was not necessary for them, Nisus and Euryalus, to cut their way per hostis through the enemy. Nisus himself knew that the Rutulians were buried in sleep and wine, and Vergil stresses the needlessness of the slaughter by his many additional allusions to their drunkenness. Carto suggests that if Vergil had allowed Nisus and Euryalus to slip through the camp unseen without slaying the enemy, the exploit would not have been sufficiently heroic or Homeric. This rather misses the point. Vergil was more interested, I believe, in showing that the two young men do the wrong thing and pay the penalty for their actions. The slaughter of the Rutulians delayed their departure from the camp, and Euryalus created an additional delay by taking booty. Had they left earlier, they would have avoided the cavalry led by Vulcans, and they still might have escaped unnoticed, had it not been for the fateful helmet. Nisus, the faster runner, did get away, and it was due in part to the onerosa praeda, the heavy loot that Euryalus fell behind and was captured. Again, Nisus could have done the right thing and carried out his mission, but his first thoughts were of Euryalus, and he sacrificed himself for his friend. Vergil thus gives us in the night expedition a story of mistakes which lead to disaster. There is no divine intervention, and the story illustrates the working of free will.
Interesting.
I mean, I tend on the whole to agree with that.
I think that's a good interpretation.
We were saying something last week about you might see this episode in the Aeneid as being in some ways almost a moral corrective to the Dolaneia. So we get the same kind of scene, but we get Nisus and Euryalus paying for their crimes as opposed to Odysseus and Diomedes getting away.
Right.
So I don't know. I mean, what did you think of this quote? Did you?
I think it's right on.
Okay.
A little bit at the end there, it's an illustration of the working of free will. That may be going a little bit too far, because it seems to me, as we discussed last time, Vergil is so intent at the beginning to bring to our consciousness this question: is every man a god to himself, or does some god overtake him? Right?
Yes.
So I don't think that the conclusion really shows that one's own desire becomes a god to himself. But I'm definitely on board with Duckworth's interpretation that there is a moral punishment here, and in that sense, it's not a correction of Homer so much, but it's taking it in a different direction.
Right. Yeah. Another thing I thought, and I think this will touch upon what we'll talk about later in this book, is this idea. Maybe the free will aspect goes too far, but I do think Vergil, much more so than Homer, is distancing himself, or the figures in the Aeneid are more distant from the gods. The gods are more removed than they are certainly in an epic like the Iliad, and so we'll get into this kind of aspect when Vergil invokes the muses once again. There's this I think this interesting similarity with Homer, where Homer calls upon the muses to inspire his poetry, and Vergil will call upon the muses, but more as kind of as a helper,
right,
rather than just kind of pure inspiration. So
right.
I saw maybe another aspect of Vergil almost keeping the gods at arm's length.
Yes, right. I think that's very accurate.
Okay.
Yeah. So we move on now, right?
Yes.
And we're going to give the listeners today the conclusion of Book 9, right? So we will finish the 3/4 point of the epic.
Yes.
Having books 10, 11, and 12 still to go through. And what happens generally speaking? Can you give like a one-sentence summary of the second half of Book 9? What are we looking at?
Lots of bodies being cut down.
Okay.
It's very battle-y.
Okay.
Right. So we begin the second half with a couple of post-mortem decapitations.
Oh, really?
So that sets the tone, I think, for what's to come. Right.
This is the Iliadic portion. So we're at line 450. Is that right?
Yes. And so the Rutulians wake up. They discover the slaughter in the camp. And so now they're all revved up for, we're going to take the fort and we're going to teach these Trojans a lesson.
Yeah.
And they signal their fury by taking the heads of Nisus and Euryalus, putting them on pikes, and kind of shaking them in the general direction of the Trojans.
Yeah, that's not nearly as popular as it used to be.
Heads on pikes.
Yes,
it used to be like every weekend.
You can see in pretty much any conquest in the past, right? This was a common trope. And I finally wrapped up that biography of Ulysses Grant by Ron Chernow. And one of the facts I learned afterwards, not in the book, is that in the last days of that conflict between the North and the South, Custer and Sherman and who was the Southern guy? I don't know, but they were the fighting became so intense that they were delivering bodies in wheelbarrows and so forth. In terms of, here's one of yours. How do you like that? The hatred was so intense. So keen was the conflict at that point.
So that in some ways, the body in the wheelbarrows is it is
like the
head on a pike.
Yeah. In 1865. So a real pivotal moment.
Interesting. So we get Nisus and Euryalus impaled, and then we get this extended scene where Euryalus' mother finds out about this. And there's this extended lament for her son, which I think is also interesting. and I think has some interesting parallels with the Iliad.
Yes, very pathetic, filled with pathos. I remembered who it was.
Yeah.
The Confederate general was John Singleton Mosby,
Okay.
the Gray Ghost, as they called him.
Why do they call him that?
Because he rode on a horse, he wore gray as a Confederate, and he apparently was very elusive, hard to catch.
Nice.
Later on became a close friend of Grant after the war was over.
Really?
Believe it or not.
That is crazy. So, Dave, you want to start? You want to read us some Latin here?
I would. I'd love to. So this is line 450. We're in Book 9 of the Aeneid. Victores praeda Rutuli spuli isque putiti, volcan taxanamum flentes, incastra ferebant, nec minor incastris luctus framneta reperto, exsanguet primis una tot caeda peremptis, serra no quenuma quingains concursus ad ipsa, corpora se meni case, que viros tepi daque re centem, caeda locet pleno spumantis sanguina rivos.
All right.
Oh, those last couple lines. That's grim.
Just gross.
Yeah.
Right. Well, let me give you Lombardo's translation and a little bit more. And
Love it.
You'll definitely get some of the Iliadic aspects of what's going on here. So the Rutulians went back to their camp, victorious and weeping, carrying their spoils in the lifeless body of Vulcanes. Their lamentation was still louder in the camp when they found Rhamnes' pale corpse, and so many of their best men, Serranus, Numa, massacred. A great throng rushed to the dead and dying men. The ground steamed with slaughter, and the foaming blood ran in rivulets. Talking amongst themselves, they recognized the spoils, Messapus' shining helmet, other bits of gear won back with so much sweat.
Yeah.
So that, yes, the ground steamed with slaughter, and the foaming blood ran in rivulets.
It's grim.
It is very grim.
It's grim. But, this is kind of part and parcel of any kind of epic. You have to have these moments. And once again, bringing Ovid into the discussion, when we get to the Metamorphoses, you see him playing around with these battle tropes. You have to have elements of grim description of macabre moments in warfare.
Yeah.
But Ovid can't help, playing it for humor. It has just become so ridiculous and trite by that point.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, Vergil retains a kind of grandeur in the midst of this grotesquerie, you might say.
Exactly. And I think what adds to kind of the tragedy is that what has been gained here. This was not some pivotal battle by which someone has gained ground or moved the matter towards conclusion. It just seems like a senseless slaughter.
Absolutely senseless.
Right. And so even at that last bit, they recognized the spoils, Messapus' shining helmet, other bits of gear won back with so much sweat.
Right.
So they lost a lot of bodies in getting back
a
few pieces of gear.
Yeah, and that's it.
That's it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Kind of a stalemate. The futility of war. But to Vergil's credit, he can tell the story with panache, even though I don't think he is in any way advocating warfare in a real sense.
Right. Right. Can I make I'm going to make a comparison to Tarantino. We've talked about.
I know who that is. Quentin.
Yes.
Right.
But have you seen any of his films?
No.
No, not a one.
No.
Okay. Well, one of the things
Reservoir Cats. What was the other one that he was really famous for?
Pope Fiction.
That's right.
Well, one of the things that Tarantino is famous for is kind of the over-the-top blood and gore to the point where it becomes cartoonish.
Yeah.
And I wonder in some ways, as you're talking about kind of Ovid's approach to this, it strikes me. Maybe,
you're going to compare them?
Yeah. I'm going to compare Quentin Tarantino and Publius Ovidius.
Okay.
In the sense that he uses it for a special effect, but he's also kind of winking at the audience at the same time. Like, look how ridiculous this is.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, what I would like to see sometime in a movie, or maybe I should say what I would like to hear, is a very accomplished actor, with a very beautiful voice, whether male or female, describing something horrific like this. And I would like to see if the description can be more disturbing, riveting, interesting, compelling, morally, or I can't say visually, than the endless CGI, which is so rapid.
Yeah.
And the shake technique, it doesn't really have any impact.
Yeah. Yeah. No. I mean that's kind of a. You're kind of describing Greek tragedy, right?
Exactly.
Where, the horror is in the mind.
Right.
It's in the description, not in what you see on the stage.
So I think there's a shortcut that's being taken. It shortchanges the imagination. Whereas when you read something like this, a great throng rushed to the dead and dying men. The ground steamed with slaughter, and the foaming blood ran in rivulets. That requires something on the part of the listener in terms of what are we imagining, and do we even want to? Right. Your mind can't help but go through the steps that the the text lays out.
Yeah.
But it's going to look different for each person.
Right. No, that's exactly right. And I think that's why every filmed version of Homer has come up short.
Yeah.
It can't match it. I think remind me, there is that one. Somebody sent us. There was like some Italian TV
of the Aeneid.
Yep. Right? But
did you watch it? I haven't watched it yet.
I mean, I watched a few clips of it, but it was the Italian was too rapid. I couldn't even really tell what was happening.
Right.
I think it was in the 70s too, so the production values were
panini espresso. It's
exactly
about as far as I got.
Exactly right. So all right, so moving on in the story. And then this is something I want to get your opinion on.
Okay.
So Vergil takes quite some time talking about the reaction of Euryalus' mother to this, right? And so I was just kind of curious, why do you think Vergil goes here? So Euryalus is not a major character. We saw him once before in the foot race.
Right.
He has this kind of tragic scene. Why draw it out was kind of bringing his mother into this. And so I mean, what bugged me about it was, okay, I get the episode is tragic, but there's almost nothing in this epic to connect me to Euryalus. Why should I really care about his death?
I see.
And then why extend it to his mother?
Right, because he's so anonymous.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's not a question I've thought about a lot. We could speculate that it's the anonymity by which Vergil tries to connect the character to those persons in his audience that don't have a real stake in the epic.
Mm-hmm.
They can see themselves in Euryalus in a way that they can't maybe in one of the major players. I don't know. Everybody has a mother, right?
Yeah.
And if you're going to try to talk a little bit about the costs of war, you have to see it through the eyes of one of the innocent bystanders who suffers the most.
Yeah.
To keep referring to American history and that conflict, this will go away eventually. But I just read this massive book. Lincoln's famous letter, to the Union mother who had lost something like 5 sons.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And he has that famous expression, very costly was the sacrifice that you laid on the altar of freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe it's kind of like that, right? You don't really realize the futility and the brutality of what's happening on the Italian landscape until you step back and see it through the eyes of Euryalus' mother.
Right.
A sympathetic person.
I really like that. I mean, that's kind of one place my mind went to as well, is that what it reminded me of broadly was Hecuba's lament for Hector, but it's the fact that Vergil gives us the lament of a woman, of a minor character.
Yep.
In some ways, it makes it more real.
Definitely.
Right.
Definitely, because we can't really relate to someone like Hecuba.
Exactly.
We do not have divine descent. That's what separates all those characters from a person like Euryalus.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Right.
And you can extend this to who are the other mothers in the epic, right? You got Juno. Nobody wants her as a mother. And you also have Venus, who is Aeneas' mother, but she's
flaky.
Other than, well said.
Yeah.
Other than caring for his destiny, she doesn't really care for anything.
Right.
She eludes and escapes and disappoints him. There's no affection, there's no gentleness. She advances his glory. But other than that,
we haven't seen her since book 4, right?
No, we haven't seen her in quite a while.
No, so
she doesn't care for anybody. And you got the other mother, right, Amata, who is she's inhabited by Alecto, the Fury.
Right.
So there's really no gentleness at all. Maybe that's part of the purpose.
Part of it balances that out.
Correct.
Yeah. So it reminded me of Hecuba's lament from book 22 of the Iliad.
Yes.
I want to just read A.S. Klein's translation.
Excellent.
Here. So he translates, "Now among the women Hecuba raised loud lament. My child, how wretched I am. Why should I live on in suffering now you are dead? You were my pride of Troy, night and day, a savior, greeted as a god by every man and woman in this city. Surely their great glory while you lived, but now death and fate overtake you." So there's a similar kind of aspect in where Euryalus' mother, she calls into question, like, why did we even come? Why was it worth it if I lose my son? It's very personal. But of course, the difference is the hopes of the Trojans aren't riding on the shoulders of Euryalus.
No.
Right? And
so in the case of Hector, obviously, that's the contrast you're making.
Yes.
The death of Hector is the death of Troy.
Right. So, I think that kind of underlines what you were saying, is that this is in some ways, it makes it more relatable. It makes it more, on the ground human. You could look at a figure like Hector as kind of, it's very tragic, but he's kind of superhuman.
Definitely.
And in the Iliad, we don't get a lot of, windows into the everyday Trojans' lives and struggle. There's just this mass out on the battlefield, right?
Well, there's that one scene in Book 6 from the Sky, I think it's Book 6, from the Sky and Gates, where Hector and Andromache and Ascanius and the nurse have that very tender moment.
That's true, yeah.
But, that's the exception that proves the rule, so to speak, because other than that, like you're saying, there's no domestic gentleness really in the epic.
Yeah.
That's the one scene.
Yeah.
It also puts me in mind of Hecuba and Odysseus have this really interesting interaction. She's a slave of war now, and she is only intent on protecting her remaining children, and she has this unvaunted courage in the face of Odysseus, who, in that play at least, is kind of a brutal murderer.
He is in actually lots of places.
Yes.
Well, within the Odyssey, even to some degree, but outside of the Odyssey,
in tragedy,
particularly.
You're right.
Yes. Yeah.
So it could be that Vergil has that scene in mind from the Iliad, and maybe some scenes, Book 22, like you were saying, and maybe some scenes from tragedy as well.
Yeah.
In which the mother gets a moment of sad glory, you might say, in the spotlight.
Right. No, I think definitely some Euripidean influence here. That didn't strike me, but I think you're absolutely right. As Euripides more so than Aeschylus and Sophocles,
definitely
are very interested in kind of the everyday,
right?
And kind of what makes what makes the lives of ordinary people move and tick. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So we move on then to lines 500, basically 503 through 589.
Right.
And we got the full-scale attack now on the Trojan camp.
Yes.
So these are the Rutulians, and now the Trojan camp is like a besieged Troy once again, right? We have a little mini Iliad, kind of.
Exactly. The Trojans find themselves exactly where they were before.
What, about 10 years previous or something?
Yeah.
Inside a city being besieged by enemies. But the cleverness of it, the genius, is that they are the foreigners. They are the invading power now besieged, and they're being besieged by those who actually live there.
Right.
So it's the opposite.
Right. Yeah. So, kind of the same, but also with its own unique twist to it.
Correct.
Yeah. Turnus calls the crew together, and they're going to attack this camp, and they're going to get over the walls and take care of this problem once and for all. Now, I thought this was quite interesting is that Vergil pauses. He breaks into the narrative, and he calls upon the muse once again.
Again.
And so I don't think. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think in the Iliad or the Odyssey we get another invocation of the muse outside of line 1. Do we?
In the Iliad, yes.
We
Remember
do?
in Book 2 with the catalog of ships.
Right. Okay. All right. But Vergil, we've seen him call upon the muse
I think this is the third time.
The third time, right? Mm-hmm. And it's also different than Homer. It's a specific muse.
Yes.
He called upon Erato earlier, and now it's a Calliope,
right?
The muse of epic. And so he calls upon this particular muse to help him continue the tale. And this kind of struck me. Why now? Mm-hmm. Why that particular muse? Why does Vergil invoke, when he invokes the muses, more specific about which of the 9 he's invoking?
Right.
And what exactly is he up to? And so I have a second Ope quote below.
Yes. Do we want to deal with the character of Calliope there in line 525?
Yeah.
Before we get into that?
Yeah. Read a little bit of Latin. Okay.
It's just so much fun to say the name Calliope, right?
Yes, it is.
Voso Calliope precor aspirata cadenti, quasi bitum ferros trages, quae funera Turnus, ediderit quem quisque berumde miserit orco, et me kin gentis ordras e vavata belli.
All right.
And can you read some of, is it Lombardo here?
This is Lombardo,
okay.
Yes. Breathe into me, muses, I pray, O Calliope, as I sing the slaughter and death Turnus dealt, and whom each hero sent down to Orcus. Unroll with me the great scroll of war.
That's a great line.
It is.
Nice job, Lombardo. Unroll with me the great scroll of war. That's nice.
Right. So, what's your sense of kind of why Vergil breaks in here? Because it interrupts the action. Is it kind of a dramatic effect, almost like taking a big breath before the big battle scene? Or?
In the most general sense, yes.
Okay.
It's a device. It's a trope to get the audience to focus more closely on what's coming. In case they're a little weary of the slaughter, here's an attempt to refocus their attention.
Okay.
Right? Try to find, let's try to find some kind of analog from stage or something. You're introducing a new guest, right? A new guest comes onto the show. You don't just say, and here comes so-and-so, and they stroll out, right?
Right.
There's a build-up. You've got to get the audience engaged, so you change in music.
Right.
Dramatic pause sometimes. Can you think of any other analogs?
I mean, I like that.
Okay.
Yeah, you get the music, the tension. It's kind of building something to a climax, and then when the scene starts, that's the release.
Yeah. Now, if there are any other theological or philosophical reasons why Calliope, why the muse instead of just some other kind of device, I don't have anything on that.
Yeah.
No thoughts for
well,
that.
Well, maybe that's where I can bring in this piece by Samuel Bassett, who wrote this way back in 1934.
Now, is this guy the inventor of the hound?
The Bassett Hound?
Right.
I think that predated him.
Okay,
he might be
right.
from the Bassett family.
So this is the Classical Weekly?
Yes.
1934? Okay.
Right. And so he wrote this article kind of puzzling about why does Vergil invoke the muse here? And how might he be kind of tagging Homer? So he writes, Vergil gives to his tale the semblance of reality in the way quite different from Homer's. Homer makes the muse alone responsible for the story. Vergil makes her a junior partner with minor responsibilities and duties. Vergil announces his theme in the first person, kano. Homer bids the muse tell the tale. Only once at the beginning of the catalog, Iliad 2, as you were saying, does Homer use a verb in the first person in a passage in which he invokes the muses. This is at the beginning of an excursus, where the narrative pauses and the poet speaks at considerable length in propria persona. In this respect, Vergil is diametrically opposed to Homer. He regularly invokes the muse when he is about to interrupt the flow of his narrative and introduce a passage which is of the nature of an excursus. Compare Aeneid 7, 37 to 80, the description of conditions in Latium when Aeneas arrived there. Later in Book 7, the catalog of forces opposed to Aeneas. And then earlier in Book 9, Cybele's request of Jupiter made long before the time of the story. And at the beginning of the epic, which will be considered presently. The only place in the Aeneid where Vergil calls upon the muse before an episode of the narrative itself is not a real exception to the rule that has just been stated. And then he quotes the lines that you just read and Lombardo translated.
Right.
This is an invocation of the muses to describe action in the story. It is not in an excursus. It reproduces the Homeric original, but with two important differences. Homer asks the muses themselves to narrate. Vergil bespeaks only their cooperation. Mecum e valvit. Unroll with me.
Yeah.
So he sees that Vergil is kind of an equal partner with the muse, not just a kind of a medium through which the muse sings. Now, I see by the look on your face, you're not quite buying it.
I'm a little confused here.
Okay.
Is the whole point that Bassett is attempting to make here as he bays on the, the content, is the only point he's trying to make is that Vergil sees himself as a partner with the muses, and Homer asks the muse to do the work on her own? Is that it?
I think that's the main point he's trying to make.
Okay, so
it took a long time to get there.
He did.
Yeah.
So I can grant that, but how does the notion of the excursus play into this as opposed to the narration of real events? That part was lost on me.
I think he was trying to make a distinction, like what like almost a mini genre within the narrative.
Okay.
So if you're going to narrate in one particular way, the muses are singing directly through you.
Okay.
If you're just simply kind of laying out a description of something, well, then maybe you can kind of pull your own weight with a muse.
I see.
Yeah.
And so Homer does not have excursus?
He does not do that.
But Vergil has two different kinds of invocations.
Yes.
The excursus and the here I'm working with the muse to tell the story.
Right.
So why is that significant? I mean, I can grant that seems to be a distinction between Vergil and Homer, but can we make any hay out of that?
Well, I think I would connect it back to that idea we were talking about at the beginning of the episode of this distance that the gods have.
Okay.
Right? And so in the Iliad particularly, the gods are right there. In the Dolaneia, Athena is right there. And in the Nisus and Euryalus episode, they muse upon, are the gods involved? Do we become gods in doing this? Who's motivating this?
Right.
And so by Vergil almost keeping the muses off at arm's length, or kind of linking arms with the muse, I think it's another way of kind of lowering the place of the gods in the story.
So I think I have a point here that can reinforce what you're saying.
Okay.
The year was 1996, perhaps, and a very famous Homeric scholar, Jenny Strauss Clay, came to the University of Iowa, where I was at the time a young graduate student, and she gave a lecture on Homer. And it was very interesting. It was riveting, actually. And she began in the way that a good scholar begins, which is setting up the tension of the question, which usually involves citing the persons that she has read and their take on some issue, and then pulling the rug out from underneath all of them.
Yes.
And saying, but this is what it really means.
Yeah.
And she did this very well. And she said, so much ink has been spilt on what is Homer's purpose in the Iliad. And then she laid out, I don't remember, the loser interpretations, which I don't remember because they were the bad ones, right?
The losers.
Right.
Yeah.
2 or 3 of them. And then she says, but actually, the purpose of the Iliad is presented right in the proemium itself, where it says, and so the will of Zeus was fulfilled. This is it, right? This is the purpose of the Iliad, to fulfill the will of Zeus. And then she traced that theme, pasim, throughout the rest of the epic and showed, this is Homer's real intention. The will of Zeus, right, the boule dios, I think it's a teletar or something like that, is then played out through the rest of the epic. And it was her point that lack of attention to that slight detail there in the proemium had skewed and corrupted many interpretations of the epic.
Interesting.
And so here we see perhaps a contrast with Vergil, because although the divine is present, it doesn't seem to get down into the nitty-gritty in the same way that it does in Homer.
Absolutely, or certainly the Iliad. I mean, I think you could make the case in the Odyssey.
You're right.
That the gods recede.
They do.
Right. There's that scene early on where Zeus is complaining about, we try to help human beings. Do they listen? No.
Right.
And so it's basically going to forget them.
Yeah, leave them to themselves.
And then Athena has to remind them, but you promised Odysseus would get home. But basically, for everybody else, you're on your own.
And Athena's action in the Odyssey is so highly partial, and it's like that of a human being.
Yes.
Whereas in the Iliad, that famous scene in the first book, when Achilles is about to slaughter Agamemnon, for his hubris, and suddenly Athena stands behind him, grabs him by the hair, and puts the other hand on his sword so he can't draw it and kill Agamemnon.
Right.
That breathes a different kind of numinosity, if I can use that word. Yeah. A different kind of divine presence than the way Athena behaves in the Odyssey.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I would totally agree with that. Just to get your take, so it was Jenny Strauss-Clay was the scholar. So do you think, so the way that I often teach the Iliad is not so much about trying to answer the question, what is the Iliad about?
Right.
But when talking about
big question.
Talking about central themes, right. I usually start the students with the first word, the rage. Yeah. Right. And so I wonder how she would respond to the retort. Well, no, it's really about the rage of Achilles and what it does to him, and kind of how rage can turn a human into a monster, rather than it is really about fulfilling the will of Zeus. Or do we need to necessarily separate those two things?
Well, I don't think they need to be separated, and I think the question, can rage turn a human being into a monster, is not one that would have occurred necessarily to Homer, because Achilles' rage is not presented as something that is outside of him; it is who he is. Yeah. And his destiny has to be played out through his character, which is that of being enraged that the lesser mortal, Agamemnon, has all the power. Yeah. Right? That nature would dictate that the naturally superior individual, Achilles, should rule. Yeah. But here's a subversion of the natural order, right? And so that kind of question is more one that Euripides would ask, right? Yeah, exactly. Which is at least 400 years later, right? When things have changed once again because of Xenophanes and Plato and Socrates and individuals like that, right? Where the gods are not the primeval force that they were.
So even Euripides in his time was kind of committing an act of presentism by imposing.
I think in some ways, yeah. I mean, this is the psychological reading of Euripides. Yes, and there probably is There's probably another interpretation, but there's definitely some difference between Aeschylus, Sophocles, those two, and Euripides. There's something different for sure.
Without a doubt. Yeah, without a doubt. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, interesting stuff. I find that this, especially from the episode last time, considering this question, like, where are the gods in this? Right. And where does so there's, certainly the heavy hand of fate is much more an important force in this epic than it ever is in the Iliad, right?
The Parcae in their El Camino, right? Rolling around.
Right. Now, exactly. I mean, I know we talked about this, way back when we talked about the Iliad early on in the history of this podcast. But that scene from book 16 of the Iliad where Zeus sees that Sarpedon is about to go down.
Yeah.
And he says that, he's fated to die. And
Right.
But he muses about, well, maybe I could just go pull him out and such. And then Hera says, well, you could do that. And says, basically, we could all do that. But if you do it, we're all going to do it. And there's kind of this whisper that you're kind of messing with things that you shouldn't mess with.
Yes.
But
upsets the whole apple cart.
Right. But Homer keeps it open. It's like Zeus, if he wanted to, could kind of toy with fate. There's also that episode where he's got the 2 jars and he's handing out, curses
That's
and
right.
blessings. So he seems to be the executor of fate.
That's right.
Whereas in Vergil, fate is
Right.
above everything.
Yes. In
right?
the Homeric epics, the theology is, I don't want to say sloppy,
It is sloppy.
but it's not coherent in the way that someone like Vergil, post-Plato, would want it to be.
Right. Exactly.
So, there are what you might call monotheistic elements or henotheistic elements in the Homeric epics where the one God rules them all.
Yeah.
But by the time you get to Vergil, there's a strong monotheism.
Yes.
Although it's represented as the fates.
Yes.
To whom all the gods, Jupiter included, are subject.
Yeah. Yeah. No, exactly. I think that's exactly right. So when I talk about these conflicts in my myth class,
Right.
I don't necessarily that Homer's theology is sloppy. I often say I think that the Greeks are in many ways just much more comfortable with those kinds of paradoxes
Absolutely.
than us post Plato and Aristotle are.
Yep.
Yeah.
And one of the wisest things ever said about the Greeks is that they are just big children, right?
Yeah.
They are so credulous. I would say they will believe anything,
Yeah.
really. That's what makes them so appealing and,
exactly.
and winsome. Who doesn't want to be around people who have just, you could call it gullibility in a negative sense, but there's a more sweet way to interpret it. They take the world on its own terms.
Yes.
Okay, that's how it is, like kids, right?
Exactly.
Okay, that's how it is. you
Right.
know.
Right.
You tell a child, there's a monster in the closet eating all your Twinkies. Oh, really? There is?
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And they respond either with terror or curiosity. Can I join him? Right?
Yeah.
And that's how the Greeks are. The Romans, very different.
Very different.
So someone's listening to this and they think, how did these guys wander off into, Homer and monsters and Twinkies? I think the justification is this is precisely what Vergil is thinking about as he's writing this epic. His mind is filled with Homer and with the tragedians, right?
Yeah.
As well as his philosophical studies. And that's why he's fascinating to me.
Very well said. And speaking of monsters and Twinkies,
Yes?
it's time for the ads.
This episode of the Ad Nauseam podcast is brought to you, ladies and gentlemen, by Ratio Coffee. Ratio Coffee in Portland, Oregon, the brew child of Mr. Mark Helweg, an entrepreneur who was tired of the mass-produced coffee. How many puns can I fit in there?
Just dropping them like that.
That's
Just
right.
Strafing us with the puns.
It's a program of rebrewal. Renewal? No. Jeff, tell me about the Ratio.
Well, I have the Ratio 8. I once had the Ratio 6. I've loved both of these machines. The Ratio 8 I have is a beautiful stainless steel machine. I've got the hand-blown glass carafe.
Borosilicate?
Of course it's borosilicate,
Okay.
right? And every morning it's waiting there. I put in my grounds into
Yes.
the metal cone.
Right.
And then I just simply hit the button.
How many? 5 or 6 different buttons? You got to do a little backflip or something like that?
It's one button.
One button?
And I barely need to just kind of brush it with my fingertip, and it's engaged. And it's a simple process.
Right.
The first step, you got the bloom.
Nice.
Get all the off-gassing, all that nasty CO2 is obliterated.
So the hot water comes down into the cone, gently massages the grounds, and
Yes.
off goes the CO2.
Yes. And then you get the brew stage, which is where the real magic happens.
Okay.
And then it's ready.
Wow.
And that's it.
And then it pours well, I hear, too.
Oh, don't get me started on the borosilicate, the hand-blown carafe. The pouring is a work of art.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's probably my favorite part of the upgrade
Okay.
to the Ratio 8.
Yes.
The
pour is
It's just a
incredible.
beautiful machine. What
That's
about
wonderful.
what do you got there over
Well,
in your place?
Oh, well, I've got the Ratio 8 also.
That's
It's
right.
got the oyster color with the walnut accents. And this machine, I think I'm going on 4 years, almost 4 years now.
Wow.
And it's like I just took it out of the box.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Shows a little bit of wear and tear, but if I were using your standard squirty plastic machines, I'd be on about the 4th one by now, honestly, because
of
they do
course.
not last with their flippy little plastic lids. And they're not well designed at all.
They're terrible. I've got a couple of them still in my basement.
That's
I
right.
don't know why they're down there, but yeah.
Would you like to hear a new limerick that I've written.
Oh, we've heard this before. This isn't new.
No, this is brand new.
Brand new. Okay, yeah, then I want to hear it.
It's not great, but I cranked it out in record time.
Okay, what do you got?
Here we go. It's in honor of Ratio. I've tired of drinking bad Joe. It vexes from head down to toe. It's brackish and tangy, repulsive and rangy. And so it's to Ratio I'll go.
Very nice. Nice.
So you could criticize.
Tangy and rangy?
I know,
Okay.
I knew that was coming.
Yes.
Can you think of something to rhyme with tangy?
Tangy? No, off the top of my head, I can't.
No, tangy, that was a tough one.
So you just you had to go with just its assonance.
That's right.
Okay.
Now, I sing a lot of hymns and psalms,
Yeah.
And sometimes those rhyme schemes, you have to pronounce the word a certain way for it to fit. You've noticed this, of course.
Exactly.
And but it's no problem.
It's no problem.
It's no problem.
I remember
So-
as a kid, it always struck me really funny because I would always pronounce it improperly to make it rhyme.
Yes, I
and
know.
that just made it hilarious.
I would do that as a kid. And but I mean, tangy and rangy,
Rangy.
It's okay.
It's okay.
All right.
So listeners, do yourself a favor. Go to ratiocoffee.com. Look at these beautiful machines and take take our word for it. They're fantastic. These are things that you can pass down to your children. Find the machine you want, the 6 or the 8. Type in the coupon code
ANCOB4.
ANCOB4.
That's correct.
And that will get them
15% off any Ratio product for the month of February.
Yeah.
AN ad nauseum coffee COB4.
right. So before you go,
Oh.
yes, get yourself one of these machines. This episode of Ad Nauseam also brought to you by Hackett Publishing. Dave, I think for pretty much about exactly as long as I have been alive,
Wow.
just north of 50 years, Hackett Publishing has been doing their thing from their home offices in Indianapolis, Indiana, and Cambridge, Massachusetts.
Yes.
They've been producing these incredible translations and academic works, affordable,
Right.
attractive.
Yes, they purvey, don't they?
They do.
They are purveyors of fine quality literature.
That's right. So I use them in my classes. I got them on my shelves. The Lombardo translation you've been hearing throughout our Aeneid series is one of these wonderful translations. I can't say enough about Hackett. But I think that you could say more maybe through verse, Dave?
I could.
Yeah?
Yes, I have a limerick I cooked up here.
What do you got?
Here we go.
Okay.
I've tired of buying junk books and enduring a clerk's nasty looks. Expensive, unsightly, regretting it nightly, yet with Hackett my book buying cooks.
I like it a lot.
Do you?
I do.
As I was composing this, it occurred to me one of those philosophical axioms that we all should ruminate upon. Mm-hmm. Just because one can write limericks doesn't mean one should. This one didn't have the problem with the tangy and the rangy.
No, it was sound. It felt solid all the way through.
Really? Well,
Right.
the last line has too many syllables, honestly, but I read them quickly. Yet with Hackett, my book buying cooks, and that did it.
It works. It sounds good to
Thank
me.
you.
Yeah.
So if you want your book buying to cook,
Yes.
you should go to hackettpublishing.com, HACKETT, pick out something from their broad range of selectable books. They have East Asian studies, classics, of course, Latin American, philosophy, modern history,
Islam.
tremendous number of options. Put them into your little grocery satchel, and then when you get to checkout, what happens?
Well, then you're going to put in the coupon code AN2023. So AN ad nauseum with the current year, and that's going to get you 20% off your entire order and also free shipping.
Check it out. All right, Jeff, so as we get back into it, now we are long around line number 590, line 600. And where are we going to go now for the rest of Book 9 of the Aeneid?
Well, before we get there, I want to say one last thing about Vergil and the Muses before we leave that behind, and just call the audience's attention to this famous mosaic that is now in the Bardo Museum in Tunis,
yes.
Tunisia.
You've been there.
I have.
Yes,
I've seen
when
it.
you visited Tatooine.
Yes, yeah, it was great, and this is one of the highlights of seeing the Vergil mosaic up close and personal. Very easily searchable, but it's Vergil seated between two very specific muses. He's between Clio, the muse of history,
Right.
and Melpomene, the muse of tragedy.
So history and tragedy.
Yes, so I just thought that was
Interesting choice.
yes, and so we just talked about Calliope showing up in the epic.
Yeah, the
but-
Muse of Epic, where's she?
and he was earlier in the epic with Erato, and now we have 2 other muses. So I thought it was just kind of a nice kind of underlining of this point we've been making of Vergil with these very specific muses.
Right.
And this is another one.
Probably the place that people have seen this the most is that it is featured on the cover of a number of the Wheelock Latin textbook.
Oh, that's right.
Which is
that's where
it's
I
not by
see
our
it.
sponsor. It's HarperCollins. But you've taught from that. I've taught from that.
Yep.
Now, we talked about it in a previous episode.
Yeah.
But there it has, on the cover, a very nice reproduction of this famous mosaic.
Yeah. Exactly. That's right. I completely forgot about that.
Yeah.
All right, before we get to the very end of Book 9,
Yes.
I want to accuse Vergil of a little bit of filler here.
Oh, really?
So there's a scene where the Rutulians attack the Trojan camp. They pull down one of the towers, crushing and killing a number of Trojans. And just like we saw with Nisus and Euryalus, 2 young men survive. And one of them, Helenor, rushes into the Rutulian line and is quickly killed. Lycus tries to climb back over the wall, and it's actually Turnus that pulls him down and kills him. And so it just struck me as kind of a mini little doublet of Nisus and Euryalus. I didn't quite understand kind of the purpose of the scene, other than just to kind of, jack up the action.
Well, he is patronized by the muse of history, so maybe he's just describing what happened.
Oh, I see.
Is that okay with you?
Well, I think he's still under the influence of Calliope here, right?
Okay.
So is this epic? I don't know. It just it struck me as a little bit unnecessary, but I'll let the audience decide for themselves.
Okay.
Right.
All right. I'm comfortable with that.
Okay. And then we get to this Ascanius, the son of Aeneas, gets his first battlefield kill.
Don't you mean Euryalus?
That's it's his other name, right?
Okay.
And so
Every hero needs at least 2 names,
of course, right.
Superman and Clark Kent.
Right. Paris and Alexander. And,
That's right. How about you?
Do I have 2 names?
Yeah.
Jeff and Jeffrey.
Okay, there we go.
Right. Dave and David. Right.
Yeah, Dumb and Dumber.
Exactly. So there's a scene that it has almost kind of a David and Goliath quality to it. Right. So we have this Rutulian, Numanus, who's out there boasting, and Ascanius takes him out. I thought it was interesting the way that Vergil frames the action. We get Ascanius killing Numanus, and then almost in like a immediate mini flashback, we get Numanus's taunt. And I thought that was the most interesting part of it, the way he's kind of shaking his fist and belittling and emasculating the Trojans before he kind of gets what's coming to him.
Yeah. So that's Nemesis, right?
Yeah.
Getting in line with hubris.
Exactly. So Ascanius on the battlefield for the first time, getting some hair on his chest as a warrior. And so he kills Numanus with an arrow. And then we get this a pretty wonderful boast, in my opinion.
Right. Do we want to do some Latin
Yeah,
first?
why don't you give us a Latin?
Just a little bit. All right, so this is line 590. Tum primum bello celerem intendissis agittam. There's that arrow. Diciter antiferas solituste rere fugacis. Ascanius fortem quemanu fudissa numanum. Qui remulo cogno menerat turnique minorem. Germanam nuper talamos sociatus habebat.
Very nicely done.
Thank you.
I'm going to give A.S. Klein's translation here, just to shake it up.
Just to mix it up a little bit.
No shade to Mr. Lombardo.
No.
But also just a quick plug. Have you ever checked out Klein's poetry and translation page?
Yes, yeah. We have referenced it numerous times here on the podcast.
Okay.
You gotta
my mind's slipping.
Don't you spend a little time each day going back through our catalog?
Not at all. Right. I don't even like looking at pictures of myself.
Neither do I.
Right. But he a prolific translator.
Yes,
and a lot of stuff available for free on the web.
Yeah, so quite accurate.
Yeah,
not I would say not quite the style of Lombardo.
Yes, I would agree.
But it's very workable.
Yes, and so just to kind of to shake it up a bit. So I want to translate those lines Dave just read, and then a bit more at length, just because I think it's just a great passage. So he translates. Then they say Ascanius first aimed his swift arrows in war, used till now to terrify wild creatures in flight, and with his hand he felled brave Numanus, who was surnamed Remulus, and had lately won Turnus' sister as his wife. Numanus marched ahead of the front rank, sounding words that were fitting and unfitting to repeat, his heart swollen with new-won royalty and boasting loudly of his greatness. Twice conquered Trojans, aren't you ashamed to be besieged and shut behind ramparts again, fending off death with walls? So it's like we were saying, it's like, aren't you ashamed? Like, here you are, back again.
Right. He figured it out,
He did,
right?
Right.
Weren't you being pummeled in Troy, and now you come here to be pummeled?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. How are you enjoying yourselves?
Right.
So behold, these are the men who demand our brides through war. What god, what madness has driven you to Italy? Here are no Atrides, no Ulysses, maker of fictions, a race from hardy stock. We bring our newborn sons to the river and toughen them with the water's fierce chill.
Oh, that's interesting.
So they're just kind of just dunking their kids?
Yeah, in the ice water?
Right, just to toughen them up?
Have you ever done that with your sons
Never.
here in Michigan?
No, I've never had.
No ice fishing?
I've never gone ice fishing
It doesn't
in my life.
appeal to you to sit out in a cold shanty waiting for some
Hovering above a hole in the ice?
fish to swim by the hole?
I've never understood that. But
The way I get my fish is I just go to the freezer and take them out of the box.
Yeah.
You know, they're encrusted with about 4 inches of bread.
Breading? Exactly,
Yeah, heat
right.
them up in the microwave and a delicacy.
you're good to go, right? As children, they keep watch in the chase and weary the forest. Their play is to wheel their horses and shoot arrows from the bow. But patient at work and used to little, our young men tame the earth with the hoe or shake cities in battle. All our life we're abraded by iron. We goad our bullocks' flanks with a reverse spear, and slow age doesn't weaken our strength of spirit or alter our vigor.
Hold on.
Yes.
He's going way over the top
man.
here, bringing in so much stuff. This monologue, this soliloquy boast. You know he's going to get it in the end.
Oh, exactly right. So he's bragging on their kids. Now he's bragging on it when we get older.
Yeah,
Right.
we still got it when we're old.
Right. We set a helmet on our white hairs and delight in collecting fresh spoils and living on plunder. And now he turns the cannons on them. So we're
Yes.
so great. Now this is what you guys are
Yeah,
like.
you Phrygian Eastern dandies.
Right. You wear embroidered saffron and gleaming purple. Idleness pleases you. You delight in the enjoyment of dance. And your tunics have sleeves and your hats have ribbons.
Can you imagine Vergil writing this? I can just see him sitting at a table somewhere in the Tuscan countryside, right? Putting out these lines or dictating them, to his servant. And then he finishes off this section. And he says, that's pretty good.
It's pretty good
I
stuff.
think I'll have an extra fig today, or an extra glass of wine.
You think he rewarded himself with an extra fig
Yeah,
that day?
I think I'll take a little longer nap, as he strolls in the sunset evening. The
Yes.
sky looks a little more bright because he thought that was some good stuff I
Good
just
stuff.
put together.
Exactly.
It's funny, it's rapid, it's over the top. I'm sure he was quite pleased with
And a
this.
satisfied sigh at the end
Exactly.
of that day, right? But I just love this. Your tunics have sleeves, and your hats are all ribbony.
Yeah, the nerve.
A few more lines here. It says, "Oh, truly, you Phrygian women, as you're not Phrygian men, run over the heights of Dindymus, where a double reed makes music for accustomed ears. The timbrels call to you, and the Berecyntian boxwood flute of the mother of Ida. Leave weapons to men and abandon the sword." Isn't that great stuff?
Yeah, the kids call that throwing shade.
Throwing shade,
right?
right,
It's a
right.
lot. I think they still do. I don't know, but I can't find any kids to tell me what's current.
Oh, really?
When I ask them, they just roll their eyes.
Your own children will keep you up on what's hip and
It's not that, Dad. Okay, granted. So what is it? It's not that. Okay.
yeah.
The students in my classes, what do they say these days? They don't say that anymore. So-
Everything moves so rapidly.
Yes.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unlike these guys who, when they get old, right, and they put the helmets on their white hair, they're still just as tough. They still know all the hip slang.
They know the hip slang, right? To their on their deathbed.
So what happens to Numanus after this long, glorious boast?
Well, apparently this is where he gets the arrow, through his head right away. So
From Ascanius.
From Ascanius, right? So again, Vergil sets it up that Numanus is killed, and then he backs it up and says, "And this is why." It's kind of interesting kind of flip in the time order.
So the incongruity, of course, which is always a nice touch in any kind of literary setting, he was killed by a very young boy, right?
Yes.
For whom it was the first kill.
Yeah.
Ascanius is not some great warrior, but it only takes the son of Aeneas, right, to dispatch the biggest boaster among the Rutulians.
Right. So it reminds me so much of the David and Goliath story.
You're right.
This is Goliath out there thumping his chest.
Right.
And here comes, scrawny shepherd boy with his
Right.
with his handful of stones.
And a slingshot.
And that's all it takes. So I did think there was some truth in that boast, though, because the stuff about, do you delight in dance and such, it kind of reminded me back to remember the Trojan game?
Yes.
Some of that, that frittering about that the Trojans did.
But this is more about Paris, right?
Yeah.
This is linking Aeneas to Paris and the kind of rebuke that Hector gives to Paris when he finds him in Helen's boudoir, right?
Right.
I think it is. It's got to be book 3. I'm trying to remember now.
I don't remember.
Book 2 is the ships. I think book 3 is the Duomachia, where Paris and Menelaus go toe to toe,
Right.
temporarily, and then he's rescued and dropped down in the the bedroom chamber of Helen.
That's right.
And Hector goes to rebuke him, and says basically this kind of thing. You're such a coward. You're so womanish in terms of your battle prowess. But then he has to forgive him because he's his brother.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's the trope.
Right.
Very similar to what happens with Aeneas in Carthage, right? Back in Book 4, when he's prancing around in the Phrygian cape and the purple and so forth.
Yes.
And he gets rebuked.
Right.
Go off to Italy and man up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well said. I think that at the end of his boast, where he actually he gives a flick of the chin to the mother of Ida. Mm-hmm. So again, he's insulting Cybele,
right?
And so maybe that's we're supposed to maybe see kind of a whisper of kind of divine revenge there.
Yes.
Again, the god is here at a remove,
right?
But maybe by reading between the lines, we can say, okay, there's more to than just a well-timed arrow from Ascanius.
That's right.
Yeah.
So where are we headed now?
Well, I think let's wrap this book up. What happens next?
Well, we have the taunt and the boast, right? Mm-hmm. We got these characters of Pandarus and Bitias.
That's right.
This is lines 670 or so, right to the end. Mm-hmm. And so they throw open the Trojan gates, right?
Yep.
And the Rutulians are about to be defeated until their hero shows up.
Yes.
Turnus, the big guy.
Right.
So now we're getting close to where the epic itself is going to terminate. So he kills Bitias. Pandarus closes the gates again. Apparently there was like a little mat you could step on, and when you stepped on it, the gates opened and closed, or there was like an electronic eye mounted above the gates.
Like a 7-Eleven.
That's right.
Right. Okay. Right.
But they don't use that pressure pad anymore. It's all optical, I think.
It's all optical these days.
But at this stage, probably they still had this sort of pressure pad.
Pressure pad, right? Yeah.
To operate.
Now, is the Pandarus? Isn't that the name of the guy who shoots the arrow that after that duel between Menelaus and Paris? Isn't he the guy who the gods kind of instigate to shoot the arrow, and then it all kind of breaks?
Pandarus?
Is it?
Yes, I think you're right. I mean, I had to check because I didn't remember. But that can't be the same Pandarus as this guy, because when I checked, it said the Trojan character back in the Iliad was killed by Diomedes.
Oh, okay.
So he didn't survive here. This guy also gets killed, though.
Yeah, Turnus kills him in this book.
Yeah, cuts his head in half with a sword. So basically, if your name is Pandarus, you are going to meet a violent end.
You're doomed.
That's right. You don't want to be that kind of guy.
Right. So Pandarus challenges. He taunts Turnus, and then Turnus turns on him and kills him. Mm-hmm. And then Vergil suggests that Turnus could have opened the gates again and let in the rest of his army.
And it could be the end.
It could be the end. But he's got his own axe to grind.
Right.
And so he's intent on his own glory, kills many Trojans. And then the Trojans rally, and Turnus has to give up. He has to back up, and he actually jumps into the Tiber River.
Yeah.
And he has to kind of slink back to his army.
Yeah. And as we know now, the Tiber River is on Aeneas' side.
Yes.
Right?
That's right. Oh, that's right. Exactly.
He's no longer on the side of Turnus, even though he's the homegrown character.
Sure. Right. And I think that Vergil wants us to remember that bit. By why does he have Turnus jump into the river? Mm-hmm. It's another kind of symbol of his surrender.
That's right.
He's kind of falling into the arms of the enemy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's over. Well, I think we have to wrap it up, don't we?
Yeah, we're up against it.
The Smuckers executives are coming in to, I don't know, sue us or something.
Oh, they were not happy about that.
No, about the Uncrustables.
No.
What's the name of that scandal? Uncrustable Gate?
Uncrustable Gate? Oh, yeah, exactly.
Like
right.
Watergate or Uncrustable Dome?
Right. So I hear them. They're getting angry. They're getting loud and noisy. So we got to wrap this up.
Taking out their butter knives and slathering up their slices of bread.
That's right.
Could this get any more ridiculous?
I don't think it could. So let's thank some people and get out of here. Dave, who do we got to thank?
We want to thank Mishka, first of all, our sound engineer, who is about to celebrate a birthday.
No.
Yeah.
All right.
So happy birthday, Mishka. We are so thankful for all your excellent work in putting together this podcast.
Indeed.
And doing a bunch of other excellent things for us. We really appreciate it.
Yes. Thanks also to Scott Van Zen and Ken Tamplin for the great music that you hear throughout the episode.
The screaming guitar.
Man,
I mean,
to sing like Ken and to play like Scott, that would be amazing.
Yeah, it really would. Take a lot of work, which I'm probably not willing to do. But I'm so glad that other people have put in the time, because I love the blues that Scott plays. It's just incredible.
Yep. So, Dave, if they want to get in touch with us, if you want a shout out, if you got a question, a comment, a suggestion,
we're not going to beg. You know, our begging days are over.
No, we're not begging. But if they would be so moved, what should they do?
They should write an email to jeff@adnauseam.com. There's a V in ad nauseam.
Yes.
Navseam, and then they should say, here I am. These are my interests in classics. Can you please give me, some shout outs on your podcast? We would be happy to do that. Or
you could write to Dave at dave@adnauseam.com. Just one Dave there.
That's right.
Don't forget the V. And if you write to Dave, make sure you just let out everything that just irritates you about the podcast.
Oh, man.
And just if you got an axe to grind, just grind it in Dave's direction.
Well, I think that if there's anything that irritates them about the podcast, it's probably me.
You think so?
I do think so.
All right.
And Jeff,
Yeah.
what's on tap for next week?
Let's do something different.
We're definitely going to do
We're
something.
going to take a break from the Aeneid.
Yeah, we
Yep.
threatened last time to do something different. I think this time we will do something different.
Do you want to let the audience know, or do you want to keep them in suspense?
I think we let them know.
Okay.
All right.
Well, go for it. Tell them what we're going to do.
So next time we're going to talk about a project I've been working on, which is a translation of a Latinist, a man named Samuel Rutherford.
Okay.
And Samuel Rutherford lived in the 17th century, and he wrote this massive book that I have been translating.
You're almost done.
I'm almost done. By the time we get to the recording of the episode, I think I will be done.
Fantastic.
So this is going to be a little bit different direction. It's not mythology. It's not history. It's classics because it's all Latin, but we'll see what we can do with it.
Sounds great.
All right. And Jeff, I think that about wraps it up. What if they want a T-shirt? Hey, we got a T-shirt order this week.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah,
Okay.
for the Quae nocent docent, right? What doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
It's a great one.
The Erasmian tag, tapathemata, tamathemata, the things that hurt teach.
Yep.
And if you want to get a T-shirt, listener, go to adnauseam.com, check out our Lurch with Merch section, and you can pick up a very nice T-shirt for yourself and support this podcast.
Fantastic. I believe I have the parting shot.
I was going to say that, Jeff. Yeah. I believe you have the gustatory parting shot.
I do. I love this because it's just loaded with pomposity. This comes from Carol Truax's The Art of Salad Making.
Isn't that great? Just the title gets The Art of Salad Making.
In which Carol writes, "Every salad you serve is a picture you have painted, a sculpture you have modeled, a drama you have created."
Can we talk about that a little bit?
What else is there to say?
Well, on the way over here, you were telling me you do a lot of the cooking for your family.
I do.
Yeah. Do you ever make salads?
I do make salads.
Okay.
Yes, but I've never thought them in sculptural terms, right?
It's a picture you've painted, a sculpture you've modeled. For me, it's more like some lettuce and assorted vegetables I toss into a bowl.
Exactly.
And my biggest challenge is getting the right amount of dressing.
Yeah.
I don't want it to swim.
No.
But I also don't want to get to the bottom and have it be dry.
Of course. Exactly right. There's the drama.
Is that artistry? Is that drama?
That is drama.
I'll never look at a salad the same way again.
Thanks for listening.